Hello my dear friends! In today's video we will start with the introduction of economics and deep into chapter 1, the foundations of economics. Let's get it! We start with understanding the nature of economics. What is economics? Economics is a social science. It studies how people and societies make choices about using scarce resources, of course, to satisfy unlimited wants. It leads to the basic economic problem, scarcity. Scarcity is a situation in which available resources are finite, whereas wants are infinite. It happens because resources are very limited. Every decision involves a choice. And whenever we make a choice, we face an opportunity cost. It is the value of the next best alternative that we actually give up. Basically, economics is divided into microeconomics and macroeconomics. Microeconomics examines individual decision making. The participants are so simple, it will be consumers, producers, and government. Macroeconomics examines the economy as a whole. The word aggregate is so important here. The participants are households, producers, government, and the fourth one, it is the foreign sector. In macroeconomics, every decision for a producer should involve one or even more factors of production. We call them as the land is all about natural resources, labor, it can be human effort and skills, capital tools, machines, infrastructure, and etc. Entrepreneurship, it can be ability to organize and take risks. We can imagine that factors of production are instruments that the company uses. Moreover, when the firm starts to overproduce goods, it refers to the problem of scarcity. And of course, negative externality to the society. To increase its awareness, there is a concept, sustainability. It examines the development which meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations. Of course, to meet their own needs. Now, let's move to the methodology of the economics. We start with three basic economic questions. Probably you know it. What to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. First two questions refer to the resource allocation, where available resources are used to possible alternatives. The last question refers to the distribution of income among individuals, of course, and population. Whenever the government will intervene, it somehow changes the allocation of resources. Therefore, it may result in inefficiencies, or we can call them market failure. Market failure happens when there is unequal distribution of resources among participants. For example, for the specific price, there are 200 goods by sellers and 100 consumers that are willing to buy, of course. Unfortunately, we have here that 100 goods will be left for consumers and no one will buy it. In the market, there are three different economic systems: free market, planned market, and mixed market. Free market, this is a private sector ownership of resources, private sector economic decision making, and price rationing to make resource allocation, of course. So actually, free market has the opportunity of entrepreneurship. Planned market goes to the public sector. It goes to the public sector ownership of resources, public sector economic decision making, and non-price rationing to make resource allocation. So actually, under the planned market, the government controls all the decisions. Mixed market is the combination of free market and planned market. Therefore, resource ownership, economic decision-making, and rationing system are made by public and private sectors. Now let's move to the understanding the world by use of models. We start with our first graph, which is production possibilities curve, or you can call it production possibilities frontier. Production possibilities curve shows the combinations of producing two goods in an economy, given the available, of course, resources. There are two main conditions that should be met. The first one, all resources must be fully employed, and the second, all resources must be used efficiently. Here on the graph, we see points A and D are effective production because they are lying on the curve and they employed at maximum resources. Point B is ineffective production. Why? Because it can be produced more. We have more capacity to produce more. And point C is impossible to produce because it lies out of the curve. Furthermore, looking on these two graphs, they have some differences. The first curve here is a straight line and another is a convex curve. Why do we draw differently? The answer is so simply, is the opportunity cost. Straight line shows the opportunity cost equals to 1. Actually, we can substitute equally one good for another one, and for convex curve, opportunity cost is increasing and we substitute one good over other, but it can be more or less. Also, production possibility curve can be increased or decreased. We can move along the curve as you see on the graph or shift the curve. The factors that lead to outward shifts are changes in the quantity of resources, changes in the quality of resources, and technological changes. Here are two graphs, straight lines and convex lines, which show the examples of outward shifts and movement along the curve. As we see, everything is the same, except that under increasing opportunity cost, we have to suffer not equally, but even more or less. Now, let's move to the method of economics. We should know the difference between positive and normative economics. Positive, it can be tested and proven. Normative economics is about value, judgments, and what should happen. So for positive, it can be facts and numbers. For normative, it can be opinions. In economics, it is essential to know what is the difference between equity and equality. Equity comes to fairness, while equality, it's being the same. For the introduction to IB economics, we have to introduce the origins of economic ideas. And we can start with ancient times. In ancient times, economics was part of philosophy and morality, focused on fair distribution and trade. In the Middle Ages, economic ideas were mainly religious, emphasizing fair price and moral trade, condemning usury. In mercantilism 16th and 18th centuries, national wealth measured by gold and silver focused on trade balance and state control. In classical school 18th and 19th centuries, Adam Smith's invisible hand, David Ricardo's comparative advantage. It was about focus on production, trade and wealth growth. In neoclassical economics, it will be late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was all about the concepts of marginal utility, rational choice and mathematical analysis of supply and demand. And last is modern approaches. It will be Keynesianism. It was about state interventionism, monetarism. It was about money supply, control, institutional and behavioral economics. It was all about social and psychological influences. This is the end of Chapter 1, the foundation of economics. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and stay tuned. Bye bye.